right, and we're back. Just before the break, you saw Runaway Robbers, one of our all-control games from the Master Students. And now we're going to move on to another capstone game. This is Hell of a Racket. So let's go ahead and play that trailer.
Welcome, all thieves and she-devils, to the Hellfire Colosseum! The bar is hot, and so is the action today, as we have a new challenger taking on a harrowing horde of gruesome demons who live and die by their sport. Enter the arena and let the chaos ensue!
And that was Hell of a Racket. And here I am right now with some of the team members from the Helltown Racketeers. Welcome. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Zach Clothier. I'm the UX designer for the game.
I'm Kazimar Gunther. I am the gameplay designer for the game.
Hi, I'm Emma Bukis, and I was art lead.
All right. Yeah, so we just had a view of the trailer for Hell of a Racket. And looks super fun, looks super creative. Why don't you all start by telling us how did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so I was the one who pitched the game, and the idea was actually based off the fact that my dad is really obsessed with tennis to the point where when I got into tennis, he burnt me out on it. So I ended up just setting it saying it's in hell and you get to reflect stuff, and then it's based off like my dad's obsession.
That's really funny. I love tennis, so I'm already a fan of this. You can see some gameplay here. So what do you do in Hell of a Racket? What's the game about?
So the game is what we like to call a first-person swinger game. The whole thing is it's a first-person shooter, but instead of shooting, enemies will fire projectiles at you, and you can reflect them back. Or if you don't have any access to projectiles, you just hit them with your racket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see the spikes on the racket that kind of indicate that'll probably cause some damage, right?
Yeah, you can just whack them.
All right, yeah. So let's go ahead and let's look at some gameplay. If y'all want to tell us what's going on right now, what's our player doing here in this gameplay?
So, I mean, you're trying to seek out all the enemies in the stage because that's how you complete a round. And you can see in the mini-map that there's a number with the icons saying, like, what type of enemies are left to kill and how many. And so, like, 2 soccer demons and a golf demon. Our football demon's kind of like a close-range, heavy fighter, while our soccer demons are kind of more like these annoying gremlins that run up to you and just kill you. Mm-hmm. And then our golf ball demons are kind of like sniper rifles that you have to reflect the projectiles back at them if you want to kill them.
Very nice. Yeah. And so what's the ultimate objective? How do you win at Hell of a Racket?
So there are 5 waves in the game. 4 of them are gauntlets of enemies, and then we have a final boss who is actually Pickleball Satan, which Kaz actually has a funny story about where the inspiration for that came from.
Yeah, my dad hates pickleball players because they keep taking his tennis courts. So just sort of as a joke, playing off of that, the final boss is Satan who plays pickleball.
Yeah, and so I've gotten to see a couple of like the early versions of the game and the early versions of the boss, and it's super fun. Like I think you've all done a great job with the visuals, with making this feel like you're in a hellscape, and it also feels like a sports arena. So it's a really good combination of those two. So while you were working on this game, were there any moments that were like particularly challenging to implement for this?
I think that art had a huge struggle for the game in general. Like, even this trailer's old for art. Like, our art looks vastly different than it does in this trailer now. But having 4 unique enemies that all have different sculpts and that each have animations and their own textures was extremely challenging. We had to go through the whole pipeline of recording mocap animations, having someone transfer those mocap animations onto a rig, and then sculpting the enemies and baking out the textures, all of that. It took a really long time. And then, of course, all of our textures in the game are hand painted. So that's another layer of complexity that we had to work with. But I think it was worth it. We wanted to go for kind of that realistic comic book style where you kind of felt like you don't want to feel it cartoonish, but it still doesn't feel like we're trying to mimic reality either. Like, it had a nice stylization to it.
For sure, yeah. It kind of calls back to some of the classic, what some people call boomer shooters, right? Were there any particular inspirations that you wanted to shout out?
One obvious one is, of course, Doom, but one that actually kind of inspired the main mechanic was actually Ultra Kill, because you can, in that game, reflect projectiles, and it was like, this is really cool. Why not focus it on that?
Yeah, I think that's where some of the best ideas come from, right? It's just one really cool mechanic, and let's make the whole game around it. As long as the gameplay loop, the main loop, is strong, you've got a good game on your hands. Yeah. So I wanted to shout out how this is an earlier version of the game. So all these Capstone games are still in somewhat active development, and some of them will definitely look a little bit different as development goes on. But even just looking at this looks amazing. So if you think this looks good, just wait until you see the actual game on Steam, right?
One thing I do want to call out is for Zach, you worked really hard on making this game accessible to a lot of people.
Yeah, so video game accessibility is something that's really important to me as someone who is legally blind. And working on a first-person swinger in this case, but a game of this genre is very difficult for visually impaired people. So from the get-go, I was like, I want to make this game very accessible. And so I did multiple big things. Like, I made the HUD in the game completely customizable. You can change the size, color, and whether the things on screen are there or not, to make them easier to see. One thing that actually started as an accessibility feature but actually became something that's now default in the game were highlights to the enemies that I worked a lot to make sure like that the enemies had a white highlight on them, and you could actually judge how far away you were from the enemy based on how the highlight was, and everyone seemed to like that feature so much it became a staple in the game now. And there's a lot of other small accessibility things in there, like, subtitles. You can change the range of your racket. I just wanted this game to be as easy to play for people with disabilities, because everyone deserves to play a game regardless of disability. And I've also gotten a lot of people to give me suggestions on how to do things, and I feel like this game has done a really good job at that.
And I don't even think it's just for people with disabilities. As a player, sometimes, I love those features. They just make playing more fun for me. I just think it makes playing more fun for everybody. It's a more unique experience for each player.
Yeah, I know I use the minimap all the time to be like, okay, here are exactly where the enemies are compared to me, and I'm able to then actually have a better plan than just like I suddenly walk around the corner and then I'm surrounded by 50 guys.
Yeah, so no, I have to echo everything you've all said. I agree. Like, these are sometimes referred to as accessibility options or decisions, but honestly, they're just great for everybody. That's the concept of universal design, right? If you make something that's accessible to as many people as you can, it's useful for everybody. Like, someone like me gets completely lost in these first-person shooters, so having outlines on the enemies is extremely helpful. And I cannot watch anything without subtitles because I can't hear what they're saying. So, so I completely understand. So that's, excellent work getting all of that done into the game. Is there anything, any part of the game that you're excited for people to discover when they play it?
I think Pickleball Satan, which is our final boss, he's so complex, and the game had to go through so many iterations that most people just don't get to him because maybe it's too hard or a stage isn't working. So he wasn't tested all that much, and I'm really excited for people to finally be able to actually play that stage and finally fully beat the game.
For sure, for sure. Anything else? Any other team members want to shout out something?
I would like to shout out the movement because initially the idea was for it to be more like feet on the ground. There would be movement stuff, but like not to the extent that this is. Like you can see how on screen where you're able to just fling yourself across the map or do these weird maneuvers that look really cool and are able to actually be functional. So, moving around in the game is actually fun, kind of like that Mario 64, where just walking around is just fun.
Yeah, you can tell just from like the movement that we're seeing here in the gameplay footage, just jumping around and chaining all those jumps together. It must be immensely satisfying. Yeah, definitely makes you feel like a skilled, pro sports player. So that's great.
And I also just kind of hope people discover just some of like the little things that we put in the game, like. The art is really cool just to kind of like look at and see everything. And there's a lot of, there's an extras menu in the game, which we put just a lot of funny little things and Easter eggs and whatever. And I think it'd be really cool for people just to be able to check all that out and just kind of see even we put some like dev stuff in there, like concept art. And I think people will enjoy these little things that we just added in the game.
Excellent. Right. And I think I mentioned earlier, but this game can be found on Steam, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we release on the 30th.
Great. April 30th. Look forward to that. There's a link to the Hell of a Racket Twitter account.
Please wishlist us, please.
You can see updated art on the screenshots already.
Oh,
they
absolutely.
were uploaded yesterday.
Excellent. Yeah, so be sure to check that out. Be sure to check out all the socials. Thank you again, Helltime Racketeers, for joining us. We are going to go ahead and take a little break, but we will move on to Super Soakdown as our next game.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.